I'm Butch Mallam. When I was about 8 years old, a friend of mine in school, I went to a one-room school in Nebraska, and he was flying model airplanes. I didn't know about it at the time, and he turned me on to gallows models. And the dime store in town sold gallows models, and my mother would bring me a gallows model every week when she went to town. They were like 25 cents, 50 maybe for a bigger one. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, in the evenings and on winter days, it was all day long and almost every day if I had a model to build. If we could get to town in the winter, my mother would bring me another model, gallows model, and I'd put it together. And when summer came around, then I had all these models to fly. In '58, I was a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine, I didn't know it at the time, but he was interested in airplanes, and we got to talking about it. And we went down to Olathe, Kansas. There was a Naval Air Station there, and took the test for the Navy flight training. It was a cadet program. And you had to have 2 years of college to get into the program. And we went down and took the test and got through all that. And in July of '58, the Navy called me and said to report to Pensacola. And that's where it started. Okay, well, I finished up flight training in February of 1960. And I was assigned to a anti-submarine squadron in San Diego. We flew S-2F aircraft. They were prop-driven. And we were assigned to the USS Bennington for aircraft carrier. And during that first cruise, I completed 100 carrier landings. And Pappy Smears was the, they call it CAG, Carrier Air Group Commander. And so when you passed a milestone of 100 carrier landings without bending anything, that was a big deal. And from there, I was in that squadron 3 years. And then I went back to Pensacola as a flight instructor. And also, I spent about 3 months as a flight instructor, and then the rest of the time I was in the maintenance department flying test ops on aircraft coming out of maintenance checks and new engines and that sort of thing. Good job. And then when I got done with that in '65, I got into a squadron in Hawaii. It was a transport squadron, and we were flying DC-6 airplanes across the Pacific and mostly into Vietnam and all over the Pacific for that matter. And I was there 2.5 years. Started with Delta in February of '69, and they had a 3-month school we had to go through, and ended up as a engineer on DC-8. And then I was assigned to Dallas base here and stayed in Dallas for 30 years and ended up flying captain on the Boeing 767. I had been interested in it and was talking to a neighbor about it, and he had an airplane and he couldn't get it flying, and he gave it to me, and I got an engine, servos, and radio, and went on from there and took it up to Denton one day and had somebody fly it for me, and I was hooked. And it went on from there, and I've got a pasture in back. There wasn't anybody back there, no horses or anything, and the guy that owned it didn't care, and I mowed a runway back there, and that's where I learned to fly, was right back there. Joined the Falcons of Lake Dallas in '86. The reason that they call them Falcons of Lake Dallas is the football team in Lake Dallas is called Falcon. And started flying out there. All we had was a patch that we mowed, and we leased it from the Corps of Engineers, and there was no shade out there. And I had been to an event someplace, and they had a shelter. And so one of our meetings, I brought it up, and in fact, it happened to be the meeting where we elect new officers. And So I brought up this suggestion that we would have a shelter, and everybody seemed to think that was a pretty good idea. And so I said, okay, seeing as how it's your idea, we'll elect you president and you put it together. And it's sort of like complaining about the cooking. You get to cook. And so 2 years later, with a lot of help, we got it done. And that's where the club really took off after that. Well, the Stinson on floats is one of my favorites. My biggest favorite right now is the 1/3 scale Cub. Love that airplane. Corsair is a good airplane. A little difficult to get to the field, but everything else in here is, you don't throw anything away just because you build another one. It's kind of like kids. You have another kid, you don't throw one kid away. Well, it's fun, as anybody that's in the hobby can tell you, and once you get hooked, you don't give it up. We have a lot of guys come back to the club that show up at the club because they did it when they were little, and they come out there and saw the airplanes flying and they couldn't stand it, and they're back flying model airplanes.